Welcome to another sleepy stroll through the oddly unsettling corners of history. Tonight, we drift back to the golden sands of ancient Egypt, but instead of marveling at the glory of the pyramids, we'll explore the surprisingly disturbing life of the pharaohs, the so-called gods on earth. Take a deep breath and get comfortable, because while it may seem glamorous to rule a kingdom, the life of a pharaoh was far from peaceful. Let's start with childhood. Many pharaohs were born into dynasties where their fate was decided before they could even walk. If you were born royal, you were considered divine, but also a prisoner of politics. Your siblings might secretly want you dead. Your mother may or may not be your aunt, and your father, likely both your ruler and your genetic cousin. Yes, inbreeding was common among royal families to preserve the divine bloodline. Unfortunately, this came with genetic disorders, physical deformities, and illnesses. Take King Tutankhamun, one of the most famous pharaohs. He walked with a cane, had a clubbed foot, and his parents were actually siblings, so while his golden mask looks majestic, the boy behind it lived in pain and died at just 19. Now, let's move on to the palace life. It's easy to imagine a pharaoh reclining in luxury, but behind the scenes, it was an exhausting performance of power, paranoia, and rituals. Every day began with elaborate ceremonies. Dozens of servants would wash, anoint, and dress the pharaoh in layers of linens and jewelry. They weren't just clothes. They were symbols of cosmic balance. One wrong piece, the gods might get angry. Or worse, your high priests might, because being pharaoh didn't mean you were in full control. Religious advisors and political rivals constantly watched and waited. Even your food wasn't safe. Tasters would sample everything to check for poison, and yet some still died from what was likely political assassination disguised as illness. Pharaohs also had to maintain divine order, or ma'at. That meant controlling the floods of the Nile, defeating enemies on the battlefield, and ensuring the gods were pleased at all times. If something went wrong, like drought or famine, guess who got blamed? That's right, the so-called living god king. To make matters worse, pharaohs often had hundreds of wives and concubines. It sounds indulgent, but it was a breeding ground for drama. Jealousy, betrayal, and political scheming were constant. One wrong look, and you could be poisoned, replaced, or accidentally dropped into the Nile. Now, death. While ordinary Egyptians had modest burials, pharaohs spent their lives preparing for the afterlife, but it wasn't peaceful. The process of mummification was long, gruesome, and deeply ritualistic. Organs were removed, brains pulled out through the nose, bodies were dried with salt, stuffed, oiled, and wrapped, but only if your priests didn't mess it up, or your tomb wasn't looted by the very people who built it. And don't forget the workers who carved your final resting place. They often died from exhaustion, or were sealed inside the tomb by cruel kings hoping to protect secrets. Even in death, pharaohs weren't safe. So, the next time you see a golden statue of Ramses or a towering pyramid, remember that beneath the shimmering surface was a life filled with fear, political manipulation, disease, and loneliness. The life of a pharaoh was not just about ruling, it was about surviving in a system where failure meant divine disgrace, and often early death. So now, close your eyes, and let the ancient sands of time cover the chaos. You are not a pharaoh, you are safe, and warm, and far from curses and palace conspiracies. Good night. And may your dreams be more restful than the disturbed rulers of ancient Egypt.